Tonight, when you get cold, you'll fix it without thinking. You'll pull a blanket off the couch, or push a button on the wall, or just let the warm air that's already moving through your house do the job for you. When you get hungry, you'll walk to a box in your kitchen that keeps a week of food fresh in the middle of December, and you'll probably complain there's nothing to eat. You won't notice any of it. That's what comfort does once you have enough of it. It disappears. But take it all away, the heater, the fridge, the walls that actually keep the wind out, the store 3 minutes down the road. Strip away every layer we've built between you and the weather, and winter turns back into what it was for almost every human being who ever lived: a slow, patient thing that spent half the year trying to kill you. And the people you come from did not survive it by being noble or gentle or clever in the way the documentaries like to show. A lot of what kept them alive was grim. Some of it was disgusting. Some of it is the kind of thing we've spent 10,000 years building a civilization so that we'd never have to do it again. So here are 6 of the grimmest, real things ancient humans did to make it to spring. And by the end, I think you'll see that every single one of them is part of the reason you're warm enough to be sitting here right now. Start with the nights, because that's where winter does its quietest killing. The further north your ancestors pushed, the longer the darkness got. 16, 17 hours of it, night after night, with the temperature falling past anything a bare human body can take. A naked person in that kind of cold slips into hypothermia in hours. So the first grim way people survived was simple, and it wasn't heroic. They piled on top of each other. Whole families pressed skin to skin in the dark, sharing body heat, breathing the same close air, because a group huddled together loses warmth far slower than a person alone. The dogs, once there were dogs, got pulled into the pile too. And there was a cost to it nobody talks about. Someone was always on the outside. Someone always took the cold edge, so the children in the middle stayed warm. And to buy a little light in all that dark, they burned the one thing that gave the most flame for its size: animal fat, rendered down and set alight in a hollow stone. Think about that. They were burning fat, pure, precious calories, just to hold back a few feet of darkness in a season where those same calories might be the difference between living and starving. That's how hard the dark pressed on them. Warmth and light were things you paid for in bodies and in food. Which brings us to the second grim way, and it's the one that sounds almost mad until you understand it. They became obsessed with fat, not meat, fat. Because here's something most people don't know. If all you eat is lean meat, pure protein, no fat, no carbohydrate, you will die. It's a real condition. Early explorers called it rabbit starvation because you can eat rabbit after rabbit, fill your stomach completely, and still waste away because the human body can't run on protein alone. In winter, when the animals themselves are lean and half-starved, this was a genuine way to die with a full belly. So ancient humans went after fat with an intensity that looks insane until you're the one freezing. They didn't just take the meat off a carcass. They cracked every long bone open with a stone to scrape out the marrow. And then they went further. In 2025, archaeologists working at a site called Neumark Nord in Germany uncovered what they called a fat factory, a place where, 125,000 years ago, Neanderthals had smashed the bones of at least 172 large animals into tens of thousands of fragments and boiled them for hours to skim the grease off the top of the water. That is a staggering amount of work for a little pot of fat. But that fat was life. It was the most concentrated energy anywhere on the landscape, and they built an entire operation around squeezing out every last drop. The third grim way follows straight from the second. If you're going to live on animals through a season with no plants, you cannot afford to be picky about which parts you eat. In fact, the parts you throw in the bin today were often the most valuable. When you spend a long winter on meat alone with no fruit and no vegetables, you're on a fast track to scurvy. Your body comes apart, your gums bleed, old wounds split back open, and eventually you die. The plants that would normally save you are dead under the snow. So where did the vitamin come from? The organs. The raw liver, the kidneys, the soft tissue most modern people never touch. Those hold the vitamin C that fresh muscle and hard cold burns straight through. The peoples who survived the harshest cold on Earth understood this in their bones. You eat the animal nose to tail, and you often eat the richest parts raw because cooking destroys the very thing keeping you from rotting alive. They drank the blood while it was still warm. They ate the fat and the organs first and left the lean muscle. The good cut you'd grill today, they're for last, or for the dogs. Everything about how they ate was upside down from how you eat, and every bit of it was keeping them alive in ways they could never have named, but had learned the hard way across 1,000 freezing generations. The fourth grim way is one your nose would refuse before your brain even got a vote. They ate meat that had gone off. On purpose. When you make a big kill in the cold, you can't finish all of it before it starts to turn. But turning isn't the same as useless. Meat left to age and ferment doesn't just stay edible, it changes. It gets softer, easier to eat, and the process adds nutrients that fresh meat doesn't have. Peoples across the frozen north kept eating this way right into modern times. Meat and fish buried, aged, and fermented until it was something that would clear a modern kitchen, then eaten as both a delicacy and a lifeline. And there's a serious argument among researchers that this goes deep into our past, that a lot of what we picture as clean hunter-gatherer eating was really scavenging and fermenting, stomach-turning by our standards and completely normal by theirs. Picture the reality of it. It's the dead of winter, you haven't made a kill in weeks, and the one thing between your family and starvation is a cache of meat you buried a month ago that now smells like death. You don't get to be disgusted. You dig it up, and you're grateful it's there. Rot, handled right, wasn't the enemy. Rot was the pantry. The fifth grim way happened when even the rotten cash ran out, when the stores failed and there was simply nothing left. Because winter never cared how much you'd managed to save. A hunt that didn't come, a spring that arrived late. And when that happened, people ate things that aren't food at all. They boiled bones a second and a third time long after the grease was gone, just for the warm, faintly meaty water. They stripped the soft inner bark off trees and pounded it into something they could swallow. They boiled hide, the same skins they wore and slept under, until the leather went soft enough to chew, and they ate their own clothing and their own shelter to buy another few days of heartbeat. This is documented again and again through recorded history, in nearly every famine anyone ever wrote down, and there's no reason to think the deep past was any kinder. It's the grimmest arithmetic there is. You burn through the very things keeping you warm in order to keep your heart beating, betting that if you can just reach spring, you can replace them. Some groups made that bet and won. A lot of them didn't. Every winter, across the whole cold half of the world, some number of people ate the last of the bark and the last of the leather and still never saw the first green shoot. And that leads to the sixth and grimmest way of all, the one we most like to pretend never happened. Because sometimes when the bark and the leather and the bones were gone, the only thing left to eat was each other. And we don't have to guess about this. At a cave called moula-guercy in France, archaeologists found the 100,000-year-old bones of at least 6 neanderthals, men, women, and children. And those bones had been cut, cracked, and scraped with the same tools, in the exact same way as the deer bones lying right beside them. The long bones were smashed open for marrow. The skulls were opened. Whoever did this wasn't burying their dead. They were processing them, like food, at a time when the big game had vanished from the land. And it wasn't a one-off. You find that same butchery on human bones at sites across Ice Age Europe. At Gough's Cave in England around 14,000 years ago, people didn't just eat their dead. They carefully cleaned the skulls and shaped the tops into cups, the oldest skull cups ever found. Whether that last one was raw hunger or something darker and more ritual, we may never fully know. But the plain fact underneath all of it is the one we flinch from. To a creature facing starvation, another human body is meat. And in the worst winters, when every other grim option on this list had already failed, that was the line some of your ancestors crossed, so that someone, maybe the specific someone you're descended from, would live to see the spring. Now here's the part that should change how you see this whole list. It's easy to hear all of that and picture savages, desperate, brutal, barely human. But look again at what these 6 things actually are. Every one of them is a solution. The obsession with fat wasn't gluttony. It was the correct answer to a lethal chemistry problem. Eating the organs raw wasn't barbarism. It was medicine, centuries before anyone had a word for vitamin. Fermenting, storing, boiling bones, eating nose to tail. That isn't the behavior of animals. That's the behavior of the sharpest problem solver the planet had ever produced, working with nothing against a season built to erase it. These weren't people who failed to be civilized. These were the people who invented the whole idea of it, one grim winter at a time. That craving for rich, fatty food wired so deep in you that you feel it right now, that's them. The urge to store, to stockpile, to keep a full pantry against a bad day, that's them. The pull to gather everyone you love close when it gets cold and dark, that's the huddle, and it's still in you. Winter didn't just fail to kill them, it carved them into the creature that would one day build a world where none of this was ever necessary again. So tonight, when you get cold, you'll pull that blanket off the couch and never once think about the family that took turns freezing on the outside of the pile so the smallest ones in the middle would live. When you open the fridge and sigh that there's nothing to eat, you won't feel the specific terror of digging up a month-old cache and praying it's still good. You'll never crack a bone for the marrow, or drink the blood while it's warm, or chew leather to reach the morning. You get to skip every grim thing on this list, but only because 100,000 years of human beings didn't. They ate the fat and the rot and the bark and, at the very end, sometimes each other. Not because they were monsters, but because they refused to lie down and die in the dark. Every one of them who made it handed the winter down to the next and the next, all the way down the line to you. You don't survive winter anymore. You barely feel it. And that isn't because winter got any weaker. It's because the grimmest, hungriest, most stubborn creatures that ever lived spent 100,000 years learning how to beat it, so that you would never have to find out what it cost.